Okay, we are recording.
All right, thank you, Dave. Hi, greetings. Welcome today to Darby Creek Watershed 101 with Krista and Edible Plants. I am Susan Miller. I'm the Executive Director of Darby Creek Valley Association. We are a nonprofit member-supported organization, and the Watershed 101 is being brought to you by DCBA, Willistown Conservancy Trust, and Stroud Water Research. And with that information, if you have any questions, you can type them into chat, or you can wait until the end and ask your questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Krista, and so we can learn all about edible wild plants.
Hi, everybody. I'm Krista Reeves. I work with Stroud Water Research Center, and I also work in New Jersey with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. I've been up in the Northeast now for about 11 years. I used to live in Florida. I'm from Florida. And so this was a whole different ball game when I moved up here. I was a chef for about 10 years down in Florida. And when I moved up here, I was looking to do something a little different. I went back to school and got my degree in environmental science, my other passion. And when I started doing a lot of field work, it just kind of naturally came together, seeing all these wild plants around me, that I started wondering which ones I could cook with. And kind of that's how that kind of took off. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And we can begin. So one of the questions that a lot of people ask me is, why forage? There's a lot of different reasons that people get into foraging. Some of those are that they want to break away from the industrialized kind of complex of supermarket supply chains and the offerings that they have there. Wild food is more nutrient dense generally than what you're getting from a farm, and their fields have been plowed and reused over and over and over, and it draws a lot of the nutrients out of the soil, and so wild foods tend to have a little bit more nutrients in them. You can also gain food independence, which I'm sure over these last few months some of you have kind of realized shortages and seen that happening in grocery stores, and wanted to be a little more independent with your food supply. There's also gaining a deeper understanding with nature and having a relationship with that that's a little more intense. You take a different look at things when you're walking around and thinking about your own sustenance. It also forces you to eat more seasonally, which is what we're supposed to be doing. You eat a more varied diet, a little more exciting diet. You start to come up with recipes and ways of cooking for the thing that's flushing that week. Some of these things are short-lived, and you got to make do with what you have real quickly. You get a bunch of it and figure out ways to preserve it, ways to cook them. And so it tends to make people think outside of the box. And then one of my favorite things is that it's a creative way to deal with the invasive plant problem. Many of the plants I'm going to feature today are invasives, and that is on purpose. We have huge problems here in PA with many invasive plants, and this is, I find, one great way to deal with that problem, and a tasty way to deal with it. So the next thing I kind of want to cover is where to forage and where not to forage. On the right side, those are the places you want to keep away from. You want to keep away from roads, at least 100 feet. The exhaust from cars kicks up a lot of heavy metals, petroleum-based products that you don't want to be eating. National parks, believe it or not, you are not supposed to be able to go in and take things out unless you have prior permission. State parks as well. I live near a couple of them. I've talked to some of, the people that work there. Some of them, they'll tell you straight up, no, you're not supposed to come in and take anything out. So you want to respect that. And also you don't want to get in trouble. And then private lands also without permission. And then of course, railroad right-of-ways. They heavily use herbicides and pesticides to control all the foliage on the sides of the railroad tracks. So even though there's, tons of great stuff on those railroad sides, because they're usually left to be, you don't want to eat any of that kind of stuff. Now, places that are great to eat things from is open space. Google Maps, you can type in open space and it'll pop up a whole bunch of different refuges and things that have been preserved, and you are allowed to forage there, but that does vary state to state, so just check with your open space commission. You can do that online. Fish and wildlife access points, so those are free game. You can go ahead in there and forage there. State game lands, but be visible, especially during hunting season. Just make sure you're either wearing a vest or, an orange hat, so that you're not poking around looking for berries and you look like something else looking for berries. Also, wildlife management areas. I know they're not really called that in PA so much. New Jersey calls them WMAs. You are allowed to forage in those. And then, of course, private land with permission. I tell people all the time, I give these talks and they're like, oh, I have tons of woodlands or whatever it may be. You can come and hunt on my property and take a look for, because I also hunt for mushrooms. I won't be touching on that today. That's a whole other webinar. It gets complicated. And then I want to talk about, using ID manuals, foraging guides, and cookbooks. These are from my private collection. There's a ton out there. I tend to find that at the entry level, the Audubon guides on the left-hand side there, the green and the maroon one, they have great pictures, color pictures, and the descriptions are really good. You can't really get confused. Peterson also makes a lot of good guides for IDing. And then, of course, the DCNR makes a lot of great material, like that one right there, the Pennsylvania Tree and Wildflower Guide, usually can pick up for a couple of bucks, so you don't have to invest a whole lot of money. On the right-hand side, these are two foraging guides that I started out with. The Northeast Foraging Guide, which is by Leda Meredith, and the one on the left that says The Forager's Harvest by Sam Thayer. They break things down really easily. The Northeast Foraging Guide is great because it does it in the beginning of the book. It'll do it by season and then type of ecotone. So if you live or you're foraging around woody wetlands, or if you're more on a beachy side of things, or if you're looking to forage in open fields, it kind of breaks it down like that. And then, of course, by season, so that in the midst of summer what you should be looking for. And then the two in the middle are going to help you figure out what to do with the food once you've gathered it. One of my personal favorites is Pascal Botter. He's the new Wild Crafted Cuisine book there. He has really taken this to a whole new level of gourmet food. He teaches you all about preservation, how to make vinegars, just making amazing food with, what people think of as weeds. And then Foraged Flavor by Tama Matsuoka Wong. She forages and brings in food and produce for Danielle in New York City. He is one of the top chefs in New York, and she is the one that has written this book with his input and given us a ton of great recipes to go through and find new and adventurous ways to cook up some of these things. So I'm not going to go over ID a whole lot. I don't want this to be like a field botany class. I want to just kind of introduce you to some basic ID characteristics that you should look for when you get your own guides. So when you're going through your guides, this is gonna be how they're going to describe the plants for you. You want to know that the leaf is called the blade, and you want to know how those edges are described, those margins. Is it serrated? Is it toothed? How many teeth does it have? Is it double toothed? Is it single toothed? Is it lobed, more like a white oak leaf? Or, you know, does it have sharp points, more like a red oak leaf? Is it a lanceolate leaf, meaning looking like a lance? Or is it smooth, which means entire on the leaf margins there? And then it's gonna show you some common leaf arrangements so that when you're looking at the plant as a whole, you get the gestalt of the plant, you're looking at it, you can see, you know, is it alternate, or are the leaves opposite, meaning that they're paired together? Or are the leaves whorled in a circular pattern around the stem? And then, of course, the shape of the leaf over here, which is what this is defining. Uh, you know, is it almond shaped? Is it fanned out? Do they look like arrowheads? Or, you know, is it the basic shape right here? You know, this is just a pretty common leaf shape, but then you get into finer detail, and then that's where you're going to start making your IDs. So I'm just going to jump right in. I've picked, I think it's 5 different plants that I'm going to highlight. And I'm going to give you 3 different recipes with most of them that I think are fun. Some of them are easy. And then if you want to get a little more involved with it, then I've got a little more advanced recipe as we go along. So the first one that I think is fun is wood sorrel. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I bet if you go outside in your yard, you're going to find it right now. This is what's commonly called clover. They sell it in the grocery stores around St. Patrick's Day. But this is an oxalis, which means that it contains oxalic acid. Normally it has little yellow flowers. The one I happen to find at the moment didn't have the little flowers open, but you can see in that picture, it's got a couple little yellow flowers at the top of the plant there. It's a heart-shaped plant, the leaf, and it's in an arrangement of 3, as you can see. The edges are smooth. There's no serration on them. And so one of the quick and easy recipes that you can do with sorrel is just make a sorrel aid, make a drink with it. And I pick a bunch of plants, and I always rinse. And, you know, if it's in a heavily bird populated area, I would definitely soak them, but not just in hot water. Keep it in cool water, because you don't want it to start leaching out the acids that are inside of it. So I would gather up about a half a cup of this, rinse it and chop it up. And then I put it in my French press that I make coffee with. That seems to be the easiest way to go for me. And I bring water to a boil and let it sit for a minute, you know, because you don't want to really boil this. It'll bring out some of the bitter flavors. So just pour hot water over it like you're making tea. You steep that for 15 minutes, let it cool down. Or if you've made it, you know, really rich and pungent, then you can go ahead and use some ice cubes to get that to a taste level that you like, and then sweeten with whatever you like. I tend to use stevia, but you can definitely use sugar or, you know, sweeten low, whatever you like to use, and sweeten that to taste. Another great thing you can do is just take that one step further and make a syrup with it. This is great for ice creams and mixed drinks. There's all kinds of like Tom Collins mixes online that use a sorrel syrup for that. And all you would do is go ahead and cook the sorrel and the hot water for 10-15 minutes, and then take the sorrel out, because like I said, you don't want it to get bitter. And then you go ahead and reduce that over like medium heat, and add about a half a cup of sugar to the 1 cup of hot water and the half a cup of sorrel that you've taken out, and just reduce that down to, you know, whatever syrupy kind of consistency you like, and chill it, and it'll stay good in the fridge for, I've had it for up to a couple of weeks, and it stayed fine for me. Then we're going to move on to a soup. This is great for summer. This is a chilled soup along the lines of gazpacho, but a little bit different. And so what goes into this is 2 cloves of garlic, or 2 heads of foraged field garlic, which I do have a picture up in the right-hand corner there of the slide. That's field garlic, and that's another forageable. And you can use scallions or foraged spring onions. They're a little bit, you know, harder to find this time of year, but they're still out there. And then whatever vegetable broth, you can even use chicken broth if you want. that's up to you. And then 2 cups of the wood sorrel, the flowers, which is great. You can set aside. They're very pretty little yellow flowers, and you can use that to garnish at the end. And 1 can of full fat coconut milk. Definitely use full fat. Please don't use the light. It's worth it. I promise. And then 3 mint leaves you can find and forage. Mountain mint. Catnip is also ubiquitous, and you can use that in there. And then salt and pepper and olive oil. So what I would do with this is you're gonna chop up the garlic and throw that into the pan with olive oil and just start to get it translucent. You don't want to overcook it. Then you're going to throw in the scallions, and as that just begins to cook, maybe 30 seconds, then you're going to put in the broth and add in your wood sorrel. You're going to cook the wood sorrel in there for maybe 10-15 minutes below a boil. Once again, don't ever boil. And cook that for 15 minutes, and then you can either leave the wood sorrel in there or you can pull it out if you don't want the vegetable matter in there. And then you add the can of coconut milk and the mint leaves at the very end. You can either chop those up and use those as a garnish once the soup has been chilled down, or you can cook it in for a more intense flavor to pair with that lemony flavor. This is a great appetizer. Since you're chilling it, you can just throw it in the fridge. And, when your dinner time comes, you can just pour it in a little bowl or a mug and have it ready to go. And don't forget the flowers. The next one, it's definitely a favorite of mine. I look forward to this all year, is staghorn sumac. And I know that there is a poisonous sumac out there, but they look nothing alike. I promise. The poisonous one is a white drupe. It looks nothing like this red, drupe of fruits. And the only trick with the staghorn sumac is knowing when they're ripe to pick, because they do come out pretty early in the summertime. And if you pick them too soon, they'll be bitter. The sugars haven't had time to process. And so what you'll do is when you grab the drupe, you just take one little bead off of it, put it in your mouth, and if it tastes kind of like sweet cranberries, that's when you know you're ready to go. Otherwise, it'll be a little bitter. And so again, an easy, fun, refreshing recipe is sumac-ade. It literally tastes like cranberry lemonade, in my opinion. So take 2 or 3 of the sumac drupe heads and a pitcher of room temperature water. You don't want it to be hot. It'll get a little bitter if you use hot water, and just be a little patient with it and put them in there. And I let them soak for maybe 15-20 minutes. And then I go in there with my hand and kind of just break them up because it's like, little seeds basically clinging to this, big flower head. So you just go in there and kind of break it up with your hand and expose more of it to the water. And then you can strain it and sweeten it to taste. And then you can add a squeeze of lemon if desired, just to deepen that tart flavor. And again, I use stevia. You can use whatever you like with this. Something that I love about foraging is making different and fun spice blends. So the next recipe is for a spice blend. And I don't know how many of you have ever heard of za'atar, but this is from the Middle East Mediterranean area. And so what you like to do is grab a couple of these sumac heads and just hang them upside down to dry. You let them fully dry out, in an area with good circulation. You don't want them to get buggy or moldy because, if you hang them somewhere like your bathroom, you might not have like good air circulation in there, and you don't want it to get moldy. So you wait for them to fully dry, and then the easiest way to remove the actual sumac from all the little seeds that are in there is to just put it inside of like a brown shopping bag. And then you put your hands in there and you just kind of smush it up like that, and it kind of pulls the sumac off of the seeds themselves. Or some people don't even mind the seeds, and they'll just pull the whole thing off and throw it in their little bullet blender. I've done it both ways, and I really can't tell the difference. So for the spice blend, I like to do 1 tablespoon of the dried sumac and then 1 tablespoon of dried foraged mugwort. We're going to go over mugwort next, but I'm sure you have all seen it. That's another one that's ubiquitous. And that has a good flavor profile, very aromatic Mediterranean taste to it. And then a tablespoon of toasted sesame seeds and a tablespoon of cumin. I recommend that you toast both the sesame and the cumin before you blend it up if you have whole cumin. If you already have ground up cumin, that's fine too. And then salt and pepper, and I also like to add a little bit of red pepper flake in there to taste. And then what I like to do with the za'atar blend is in the next recipe here, this Mediterranean chicken dish. I think this is a great dish for big batch cooking. You know, one of those things you like to put together on a Sunday afternoon and have it 2 times during the week. You don't have to think about dinner. And I like to use chicken thighs for this, bone in and skin on. I find that it has a much better depth of flavor. Chicken breasts tend to just get way too dry. But if you are going to use chicken breast, I would definitely get them bone in and skin on, because you're going to put this in the oven and you don't want it to get, you know, too dry. And then a bunch of Mediterranean quartered vegetables. I like to use zucchini, eggplant, purple onions, red peppers, tomato, and whole garlic cloves, just smashed to let the oils out. And you can add whatever you like. If you don't like peppers, take them out. If you like mushrooms, add mushrooms. That's totally fine. And then, you know, however deep you want this to be, you can use 1 to 3 tablespoons of the za'atar blend in there. And then I also like to add a little extra mugwort, just because I love, you know, the flavor profile of that. Feel like it gives it a more aromatic quality. And then just a little bit of olive oil, not a lot, because the chicken, once it starts to cook down, is going to add a lot of fat to the dish. And then the finishing touch on this is balsamic vinegar and lemon to taste. So I like to use, depending on how big of a dish I'm making, a lot of times I'll make 6 to 8 chicken thighs and, you know, 2 big things to go in the oven. So, you know, I'll use per tray, I'll use maybe 3 tablespoons of the za'atar and 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. And then halfway through cooking, you're going to do this at 350, cover it up, put it in there for an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how deep your baking dish is. The more shallow it is, the less time you cook it for. So hour for a shallow dish, hour and a half for a deep dish. And then you're going to take the foil off, and you're going to leave the heat about where it is, and then put the lemon on at that point. You introduce the acid, and then cook it for about another hour. And you can blast it with your broiler at the last second, maybe last, you know, 5 minutes to really crisp up the skin on the chicken. And that one tastes great and super healthy, lots of vegetables. And like I said, it keeps really well, and it's great to reheat throughout the week. And as promised, so we have mugwort next. This is, I call it a 3-season herb. It comes out really early in spring, and it lasts all the way basically until snow starts to fall, you know, in the winter time. And real simple way to use this one is dried. And like I said, it's an aromatic herb. It's oregano-like. As you can see this leaf in the picture, it's silvery underneath. That's one of its dead giveaway characteristics, how to identify it. And I like to pick this before it goes to flour, but there are some recipes that you can use the flour in, like the tea below. So depending on what you're going to do with it is, you know, how you want to gather it. I like to get the first stuff in spring that really pops up. It's got, I feel like, less bitter and more aromatic qualities to it. And I'll, you know, go out and gather as much as I possibly can and hang it all over my house. And then I put it in like those the strawberry trays. You get those plastic strawberry trays, and that keeps air circulating through there, just in case you have a little bit of moisture. You don't want it to get moldy or anything like that. So I gather the top quarter of the plant, before, like I said, before it goes to flour, and rinse it off and hang it upside down in bundles to dry. Couldn't be simpler. Then the fresh mugwort, I like to use this best as garnishes, or when I'm out fishing and I get a nice trout, I love to grill them and stuff them with tons of fresh mugwort. It just infuses the whole fish with a little bit of lemon in there, and you'll be amazed at, you catch the fish, you got some mugwort right there on the side of the water, and ready to go. But also, like I said, you can chop this up and use it as a garnish for soups, stews, salads on top of eggs. And it's a bitter aromatic, so you don't want to use too much, but it's definitely one of those things like cilantro that you can put on top of things to give it just that extra punch. And the tea that you can make is a tonic. Actually, a great historical fact is when tea became really expensive during colonial times, during the Boston Tea Party, when we were throwing it all in the water. What we had to do is kind of shift and figure out something that we could substitute for the tea we were drinking. There's a couple of things that we use, but one of them was mugwort. It does get its name, honestly, mugwort. You can also make beer from this. And so the leaves and the flowers are for a nighttime soothing tea. It has a nervine quality to it and help you get to sleep. And if you have stomach issues, the roots are good for that. So you would want to pull the whole plant up and separate it, and just make sure that you clean the roots really well. They hang on to dirt way better than you think they will. Even after 2-3 rinses, I've still gone in and had to strain out the dirt from a cup of tea. So definitely, give that a really good cleaning. And, it's 1 ounces to 4 cups of water is the proportions that I use. I like to steep it for 5 to 10 minutes. And if you don't drink all of it, that's fine. Just go ahead and it'll stay maybe 1 or 2 days, but I wouldn't hang on to it for more than a couple of days. It'll start to get a little funky in the fridge on you. The next one we're going to look at is another great 3-season green is stinging nettles. This is my favorite tea of all time. This, to me, growing up in Florida, being from the South, we had sweet tea all the time. And to me, this is the closest thing to sweet tea without being tea. A lot of times, if you're getting the sweeter, younger greens in spring, I don't even need to add anything to sweeten it. It just has a natural sweetness to itself. And great fact is that it has one of the highest vitamin C contents of any, forageable green out there. But the trick is to simmer it below a boil for 6 minutes and under to retain that vitamin C content. Once you go beyond that, there's a process in chemistry called sublimation. It's where, something goes from a solid to a gaseous. So it'll just boil right out of there for you. The best example of that is when you open your freezer door and you get that fog that comes out. It's kind of the same thing. It's your ice cube going, to a gaseous state. So this happens to coffee also, fun fact. If you cook your coffee too long or reheat it in the microwave, you're actually losing the caffeine. It does the same thing. So I tend to use 1 cup of the fresh nettle leaf tops. Get them before they start to go. I know they're starting to go to seed and to flower right now, but you find, a nice little woody area where they're getting shade and not so much sun, and there's still plenty of them. I took this picture, just a couple of days ago. So there's plenty of them out there that haven't gone to flower yet. Excuse me. And take that a step further, and you can make a soup with this. This is my favorite soup. I don't tend to eat this as a cold soup, but you can also do that. I know there's a lot of soup recipes out there, but this is one of the most nutrient-dense vegetables that you can find out there. And it has, like I said, it's just sweet on its own. And when I make soup, I tend to like to make a huge batch of it and freeze half of it away. So I go out and get like half a shopping bag full of nettle leaf tops. And when you're gathering nettles, I've got a picture up there in the right corner. They have spines. They get that name stinging, very honestly. I tend to use a lambskin glove because I've used just regular, gloves the plastic gloves, and those barbs go right through. It's akin to like fiberglass. And if you've ever been stung by nettles, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get that sensation that feels like it's stinging for at least the rest of the day if you've run into them with your legs. but it'll mess your hands up pretty good too. So just definitely be careful. But as soon as the heat hits it, the stinging goes right out of it. So don't be afraid there. So in this recipe, along with the nettles, I would use a half cup of celery and shallots. You can use onions if you want, or if you find field onions, that's great too. And then a pound of Yukon Gold potatoes, I feel are best. You can use russets, tends to get a little mealy, so I go with the Yukon Golds. 6 cups of stock, your choice, vegetable or chicken. And again, a teaspoon of dried mugwort and a bay leaf, salt and pepper to taste, and 2 to 3 tablespoons of heavy cream. This can be omitted if you're a vegan or a vegetarian. And then to finish it off at the very end, 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice. And how I make this is I start by just going ahead and putting the oil in the pan with the nettles and then just kind of cook them until they wilt a little bit. Then I pull the nettles out because then I can handle them a little easier. And I can put them on the chopping board, chop them up, and not even worry about using gloves or anything like that. So you wilt the leaves a little bit. You pull those aside, chop them up, and then you can throw them in with the celery and the shallots. You can also add garlic or field garlic if you want. And then you go ahead and put the potatoes in. I tend to like to cook the potatoes in with just the oil for a couple of minutes before I add in the stock. So then you can go ahead and put in the stock after that and then add all your spices and add the nettles back in. If you're going to use the heavy cream to make it a cream soup, you can do this at the end. You put it in 15 minutes before it's about to be done, and then you add the lemon juice when it's finished. It just adds a really nice acid touch to it that I think really brings out the sweet and balanced flavor of the nettles. And I know Dave Bressler was looking forward to this one. This is broadleaf plantain. And this is, I know you guys, you see these kale chips that are like $6 a bag that they sell in the grocery stores. It's just, insane. And these plantains are so ubiquitous that the nickname for them is called white man's footsteps. So that just means that, the indigenous people, anywhere a white man would be, that they saw these plantains come up. And what that just means is that they're a rutteral, they're a weed. They'll grow anywhere that there's been disturbance. I guarantee they're right outside your door right now, somewhere in your yard. These come out early in spring, and they'll pretty much stay until the snow snuffs them out. So they're there most of the year. For plantain chips, this is a super easy snack. You just go out and collect 2 cups of, the younger ones. You want to get the younger, the better. And that's true of all vegetables and plants. Is the younger, it's going to be less bitter. So you have those, you just rinse them off. You don't want to clean them vigorously or anything. And then you put them in a bowl once you've got them mostly dry, most of the water off. And then you add sesame oil if you have it, olive oil if you don't. And then if you can see on the stalk there in the picture, those are the plantain seeds. So this is twofold. So you get to use the leaves and you get to use the seeds. The seeds are almost ready. I took this picture a few days ago, and it was just, you can see there's a little bit of a flowering coming to them. And as soon as they're right past that stage, they go to seed stage. So if you don't have the seeds or they haven't formed yet, you can use sesame seeds, flax seeds, anything like that. You toss it in the bowl, cover everything with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper to taste, or anything else you want to use in there. You can get creative with it. And then you just lay them out on a baking sheet. Try not to overlap them a ton. And then put them into an oven that's around 350 for just 6 minutes. Keep an eye on them. They're a little different depending on what size they are. Or if you happen to use the narrow leaf plantain, which is what is in the picture up there on the right-hand side, they're, a little smaller, so a little less time. Just got to keep an eye on them. This next recipe comes from Pascal Botter's book. Definitely give him props on this one. So this is faux seaweed salad. And this is a great companion if you're making homemade sushi or some other Japanese flavored kind of inspired dishes with that great umami flavor to them. So 2 cups of the clean young plantain leaves. tablespoon of sesame oil, tablespoon of soy sauce. He says 1 garlic clove, I say 2, but that's just me. And a teaspoon of either sesame seeds or the plantain seeds if they've come to ripeness. And this one is super easy. You just blanch the plantain leaves for a couple of minutes, just so that they go limp and become a little bit translucent in some really salty boiling water. And then you just scoop them out and put them in a bowl. And this is going to be like a cold seaweed salad on the side. So you just add all those ingredients. If you don't like raw garlic, you can saute off your garlic for just a second in that sesame seed oil. The next one is a really cool dish that I've gotten into, is like stuffed leaves lately. So these, you want to get the larger leaves. These are, some plantains, depending on what kind of sun they're getting, they can be little guys, about the size of a quarter, or I have seen them super huge. So for these, I tend to get like the bigger plantain leaves. I don't use the narrow ones because it, obviously can't roll anything up in there. So definitely use the broadleaf plantain. And you can use ground beef, you can use lamb, you can use ground pork if you want to. And so I combine that with 2 cups of cooked rice and 1 beaten egg. And don't cook the meat, ahead of time, but do cook the rice ahead of time. You want the rice to absorb that flavor and kind of become part of the dish. You can add garlic or whatever other flavors that you like into that. A lot of these you can make them whatever you want to be. And so you cook up the rice, you combine all of these ingredients, and then you're going to go ahead and stuff the leaves and line them in a tray like you would like the grape leaves. And put them into an oven that's 350 degrees. And you want to cook that for about 15 to 20 minutes. And depending on how thick you've kind of stuffed the leaves, and that's going to adjust your time a little bit there. Just so you want to start seeing the juice from the meat coming clear out of the leaves. There is how I like to go with that. And so a couple other summertime offerings that, maybe you have seen or haven't seen. Wineberries are in full, kilt right now. They're going strong. They're a little different than raspberries. The way to tell those two apart is that wineberries have a little bit more pubescence, which is those little hairs on the outside of the fruit and the stalks. So, and those are an invasive. So those are an invasive from Japan. So go ahead and eat as many of those as you want. Wild bergamot, if you, like me, like Earl Grey tea, and wild bergamot is everywhere right about now, but make sure you ethically forage that one. That is a native, and you only want to take 10% of any population that you find. So any aerial parts, you're going to take that, rinse it when you get home, hang it upside down to dry, and then you can either just use the blooms and the leaves, or you can chop it all up and put it into your tea. Another one I find is really fun is garlic mustard seeds. So that one's another one that I know just takes over, totally ubiquitous. And right now the greens aren't so great, but they've shot up their seed pods. And as you can see there in my hand, you just split open the little pod, and you just pop them into a bowl, have a little party, sit there, watch TV, whatever. And you could pretty much do anything you want with these that you could do with regular mustard seeds. I like to make a gourmet mustard with it. You can put a little bit of wine in there with that and just mash them up with mortar pestle, however you want to, and make your own mustard basically. You can pickle, you put them in with pickling, any kind of fruits that you have left over from the garden that you're going to put into pickle, and you can just throw these seeds in there and it gives a great flavor. Blackberries are just about coming ripe right about now, and those are definitely easy to tell apart from the wineberries and from the raspberries. Lamb's quarters, that is basically the equivalent of wild spinach, and it has just the same nutrients as spinach, but it's free. And I think it's even tastier. I like to eat this one like with eggs Florentine. So you have a little piece of bread or an English muffin, and then you just make sauteed lamb's quarters with a little onion, garlic, and then you put that underneath your poached egg, and that's delicious. And then field garlic, which I referred to, is in bloom now, but you can still kind of find some of the heads before they've opened up and become flowers. And that one is in purple. There's a cultivar out there that's gone pretty much wild that I had in the picture before that's purple, but this little one right here happens to be white. Just make sure you check your IDs, but if you crush it and you smell garlic, you know you're on the right path. So I'm just gonna finish up here with a couple of remember to always. And just remember to always ID your ingredients. You don't want to be eating anything that's going to make you sick and, turn you off of this. Make sure to rinse and or wash your ingredients thoroughly. My wife is super strict about that. She makes sure that we come home and rinse everything off right away so we don't forget. And then, like I said, eat right away or preserve. You don't want this stuff to go bad. And then what was the whole point of going out and getting it? And you don't want to, get yourself sick by eating it once it's turned a little bit. And then forage ethically. I did mention that before. If it's a native or it's endangered, if it's endangered, just don't really pick it or only grab a couple. If it's a native and there's only small populations, a good rule of thumb is to only pull 10% of the population, like ramps. You don't want to pull them by the bulb. You always want to just get the aerial parts of them and only take 10% of the population so that they can replenish the next year. And eat the invasives as much as you can. That's just a good way, in my estimation, to help control the populations and do something productive with them. And of course, don't trespass on anybody's property or pick near main roads. And like I said before, railroads, because you don't know what kind of pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals somebody's using near those areas. So now that we're at the end of it, thank you very much, and ready for some Q&A time.
Great, Krista. Sue, are you gonna?
Yep, I'm still here. I want to thank you so much. That was a very interesting and educational presentation. Definitely will be, I don't know what the word is. Looking out for little snacks, I guess I should say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways to take this. Like, I tried to give some easy, thoughtful recipes. And then if you want to go a little further with things, there's definitely ways to go with this. And like I said, Pascal Botter, he's one of my heroes of the new forage food movement. And he's online. He's on Facebook. He has his own group. If you want to, look him up or reference him. And Dave wants to know, where do I find most of these types of plants? Well, as I said, a lot of these are invasives and they're ubiquitous. They are everywhere. The wood sorrel, the plantain chip or the leaves, all those things, mugwort, those are in usually just disturbed areas. So open areas. The only one that I can think of, the wood sorrel does like it a little bit more in the shade, but you can find that, in any sunny area as well. But those are mostly in your yard or just, along a riverbank. There's tons of those because it gets disturbed a lot with, the water coming up and down. Sumac, a lot of times you'll actually find those in hedgerows underneath of power lines because birds like to eat the seeds and then they poop them out, and then you have a whole row of them underneath, underneath where the power lines are. What was that last question there, Dave? I'll turn the chat on. There we go.
What is the difference between wood sorrel and other clover?
Right. So clover is going to have that white flower that comes up that everybody knows. There's the purple variety, red clover, and then white clover. The leaves are flat on one edge, whereas with the wood sorrel, it's definitely rounded and looks like a heart. So those are definitely different. So, invest in a guidebook, or, they have apps now. I have one called Leaf Snap. That's free. That's a free app that you can use. Yeah, it's got ads, but whatever. You can pay for the upgrade or not. And what you do is you take a photo of whatever you're looking at, and you can either do it by the flower, by the leaf, and it's got a couple other, by the bark, and that's really good. And then, of course, there's Facebook forums that you can join that are just about IDs. It's all about just IDing things. And then you can join other forums that teach you, you take the next step. There's also somebody I follow on YouTube. It's called Learn Your Land. And his name is Adam Harrington, and he is amazing. He has given me a lot of content to work from, and he puts out something new probably once every 2 weeks. He's heavily into mushrooms. He's a lot into the mushroom stuff, but he definitely does plants as well. So check him out. I will type that actually in here. Oh, you got it, Dave. Thanks. But he's awesome, and he's PA based, so he's from the area, and so everything that he looks at and goes through, you can find in your area as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions? You can type it into chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions.
Cool.
I want to thank you again. It was very educational. And just so people know, we will be sending out a copy of this recording, and we'll send you a copy to Krista in case you're
Cool.
in. And if anyone has any other questions, you can email me and I can pass them on to Krista for you. And you can find my information, and we also have other webinars coming up, and you can sign up at dcba.org to get emails on future webinars. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Krista. It was great.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.